In the last 23 years, yes, Diamond is 23 this month, I ticked along for the first 20 and then my super accelerated growth was just in the last 3. So obviously I've done a lot of thinking about what the first 20 were, namely a very typical journey of a small business to a 7-figure turnover and then sticking there. And then the bit that transformed the company into what it is now, which is doubling its turnover year on year, heading towards our £40 million goal. I'll be looking at this a lot over the next few months as I write this year's books, but for me it was summed up by one monster shift in my thinking. I was prepared to gamble big time in an act of reasonable recklessness. You see, I'd had an income for 20 years, which was exactly what I needed over that time to keep myself and my children and various husbands in the manner to which they had become accustomed. A steady growing income as our holiday, home and lifestyle requirements grew, and I grew the business sensibly and incrementally, and I fulfilled this, but I never grew the business into the giant that would provide me with my big goals, which is to retire by 50, a multi-millionaire. It was an act of reasonable recklessness that propelled my business from small time to big time, and all chips on red, a gamble and exposure to risk that I simply wasn't prepared to take for the 20 years previous that I was prepared to do from 2012 onwards. As many of you may know, my last divorce was not an easy one, and I faced losing half of everything for a 7-year marriage, and it was the prospect of losing all of that that allowed me to gamble. All of a sudden the risk was massively reduced, particularly I was going to lose it anyway. I don't know if I would have taken that gamble if I was potentially risking my secure property portfolio, my home, and undermining the children's lifestyle. But they were going off to uni, I was going to lose the property anyway, so what was I going to lose potentially was massively reduced, so I could go for it in order to go for my big goals. It strikes me that this is why we should be encouraging entrepreneurialism at an early age, because the kids have got fewer assets, they've got fewer responsibilities and fewer demands on their income, so they can afford to risk a bit more, can't they? But when we, as small business people, get stuck in preservation mode and move away from risk, become risk adverse, sometimes we stymie the growth of our businesses. Now, I don't want you to throw all your chips into a poor business plan. I had a good plan and I'd crunched the numbers and I'd sought good advice and had the ability to finance not just the initial bit, but also the working capital moving forward. But it was a risk. I risked my 6-figure income from a possible, but not guaranteed, 7-figure income in the future. And there's not a lot of people that will go from 6 figures to nothing for 3 years on what was effectively a gamble, which is what I had to do to capitalise the business enough in the short term. So when you gamble, you have to be prepared to lose. The value of your investment can go up as well as go down. But to do something extraordinary in your business, you may have to stop being so risk adverse and take the plunge into something that's a little bit riskier than your norm. It's working for me so far, touch wood. Finally, we're back in profit and our turnover has increased 5-fold in 3 years with an increasing trajectory. So my gamble is paying off, but without that act of reasonable recklessness, I don't think it would have been possible to achieve it. So maybe ask yourself today, what act of reasonable recklessness could you gamble on to shift your business or life on? The phoning of a major client of an account that's too big, securing a loan for your business expansion, shifting your business from small time to big time, or maybe even asking someone out on a date even. There's no guarantee it will work, it is a gamble after all, but as long as you're prepared to take reasonable risk, your returns could be exponential. Go be lucky.